Every year of your career is not equivalent. This is one of the crazy ones, I guarantee you. You can just do things. It turns out you can just do things and it's fine. I used to wake up every 4 hours for 2 years and read an email report that I had this script send to me of what the top activity in the site was across every category. And if I saw a scraper, go in the database, kick them off the network. So everything was manual. Everything was hard. I think the major delta between even 2 years ago today is our belief that the software will arrive. Machine learning was the breakthrough and robotics was late to it. Robotics really only opened their eyes to modern machine learning like 2 or 3 years ago. In Karate Kid, he's like painting a fence and then he's like waxing a car and it turns out he's learning karate. Like I spent a lot of time painting fences and waxing cars to be the person who got to kind of be in that job. So my job it's intense, it's stressful, it's competitive, it's fun as hell.
Everyone, let's go ahead and get started. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on introductions, but it is a distinct pleasure to invite a dear friend, former colleague, an amazing father, but also the Meta CTO, Andrew Bosworth, to the stage here. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, Boz. I've known Boz for 20 years, so we'll keep this light, we'll keep this fun, hopefully a little spicy. Boz, all of us have a story about joining Facebook.
My story is you interviewing me. Your question was implement a queue with a stack. And then what's the runtime? I remember it vividly. I actually didn't do great on that interview, if I'm being honest with you. But I did better than the other ones.
But no, I mean, how did you find out about Facebook in the early days? I mean, I knew you TA'd Mark.
Yeah.
But it was you, Federman, Zhuang, and Bob Trahan, I think, who were all at Microsoft. But tell us a little bit more about
John
kind
Warman.
of the super early days.
Yeah,
John Warman.
I joined the product Facebook. I joined on day 2 as a Harvard undergraduate.
What's your ID?
1,681, which for those in the know means I was user 1,678. It's the first 3 were test accounts. So that's my user ID for the product. So I used the product right away. And Mark had been just a few weeks earlier, had finished the final in a class, Introduction to Artificial Intelligence, CS 182, where he was in my section. So I was a teaching fellow in section. And I had to vouch for him to the ad board after Face Mash.
I didn't know this.
Yeah, Face Mash, the ad board came to my professor, and the professor, David Parks, came to me and was like, hey, is this guy okay? He's like, yeah, he's okay. And he's like, all right, good. And so he was not really focused on my class. I'll say that. He was building Facebook while he was in the class.
I didn't know this part of the story.
Yeah. And and then time went on and I had gone to Microsoft it was a really, I don't know if we graduated, but you understand, 2004 was the class of kids who had just seen the bubble burst when they were freshmen, right? 2000. So it was an apogee. It was a small number of computer science graduates, maybe 40 or 50 of us. And I think more than half of us went to Microsoft.
Okay.
Microsoft was just like cleaning up university recruiting in computer science at the time. And so I was at my desk at Microsoft and I got a message on AOL Instant Messenger, from a person being like, hey, you want to come work for Facebook? And I was like, I just got this job at Microsoft. Like I bought a house. Like, I think I'm good. She's like, you can buy 10 houses in the Bay Area with the money that we'll get from Facebook. And I was like, well, now I know you're lying because I know what 10 houses in the Bay Area cost even back then. You can't be doing that. So this is some bullshit. But
wait, this is not Dana Hayes, is it?
Dana Hayes, absolutely. Okay. Dana Hayes, very good.
Yeah.
But my family's in the Bay. So I'm like, but I'll take a free ticket. So I fly down with Dave Federman. We stay at my parents' house. We interview. And we were blown away. We expected it to be a total joke. We used to have a lunch called Sweet Dudes Who Love to Party Lunch, SDWTLP. Those were early days. And we were all making fun of, Facebook, you can go join Facebook, whatever. And then me and my buddy went and we were like, we got to join this company. This is legit. Mark had such an incredible vision. I met with Jeff Rothschild. I got interviewed by Adam D'Angelo and Diddy. Do we call him Diddy anymore? Or is that just me?
No, sorry. I think it was not cool for the last 4 or 5 months. But I think
we're back now.
We're back now. We're back.
We're
back.
That's right. That's a good point. Yeah, he's been exonerated.
More or less.
We're back.
Still a bad dude, but okay, yeah.
Yeah. So we were so blown away. So we went back to Seattle and we went directly from the airport to a party that was well underway. Everyone was smashed and everyone was like, oh, how was Facebook? And we're like, no, it's amazing. We're going to join. And literally Charlie Cheever, who's another part of our crew, on his BlackBerry, drunk as a skunk, starts typing a message to the recruiter like, I want to join. Has us like proofread it because we are not yet drunk, and then send it. So within a few months, we had 7 of us who all went down together to join January 9th, 2006.
Incredible. Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things I often get asked about even today is like, what did you see in Mark kind of like in the early days? And I think I tell them that 2 things are as kind of like obvious about him today, even within 10 minutes of meeting him, as it was when he was 19, is that he is incredibly smart. Like his clock speed is just 4 standard deviations away from like most people. And he's just like incredibly intense, right? Like when you meet him, you kind of have like this, like he will shape the world around him in a vision of like what he sees. And he's clearly kind of doing it today still. I mean, I think it's the founder mode is back for him.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. He's honestly reached, you really keep thinking this guy cannot possibly get more intense. And he does.
He does. Yeah. Well, if you already kind of mentioned this a little bit, but if you had to pick 3 words to describe the early Facebook culture, what comes to mind?
It was chaotic, super naive, if I'm being totally honest, which I think is a good thing.
It's a feature, not a bug.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. It was fun. I think it's important. It was fun. But yeah, chaotic is definitely the number 1 word. It's definitely the top word. Have they ever heard the story of Ruchi and the Ethernet?
I think we'll let Ruchi say that story, but you should go for it.
This is how chaotic it was. At one point, the site goes down, but we can't fix it because our internal network is also down. And we're like, are we under attack? Is it DDoS? What's going on? And it's like hours. And this is bad. We don't have site downtime. We did not have site downtime. We did not tolerate that. So it was a big deal. Everyone's freaking out. And then finally, like one of our IT guys, I think Taner, starts walking around the wall. What's he doing? And he finds a cable, and sure enough, not her fault. Ruchi had been trying to plug her laptop into the Ethernet. And so she found like the extra edge of the Ethernet cable. And what she did is she just plugged it into the wall, which is fine. Unfortunately, what she didn't do is it wasn't the right cable. So she had plugged the Ethernet into itself. And not her fault, due to a misconfigured server, we ping flooded our own network. And then due to a misconfigured firewall, it bled over to the production network. And so we still tell the story of the time Ruchi plugged the internet into itself. And it took the whole site down.
I mean, this is
so chaotic. Just I want you to imagine you're just like working, and then suddenly it's like a fire drill, and everyone's freaking out. And then a guy's like walking along stalking the walls, and like unplugging every Ethernet cable, and that fixes the internet. Like it's like an unbelievable accomplishment. So it's just so chaotic.
At SPC, it's Finn and I who do the IT work, not Ruchi.
It's not really her fault. Again, these were misconfigured things, but still hilarious.
But it's interesting. There's one thing that you said there that I think is something that I often think about for startups, which is that startups are so hard for so many reasons. It's such a crazy roller coaster of ups and downs, but it should also feel like fun, right? Like no matter how hard it gets, there should be some intrinsic source of camaraderie, of fun, of a sense of like optimism about what you're building. And if you're not having at least a small, like some fun, then something's off. And I tell people this all the time, that no matter how hard it gets, it should never feel like completely like soulless or joyless.
Yeah, it's hard to describe. Like fun is like one of the most ineffable qualities. It's like you really can't make something fun. Like that's one of the worst ideas. Attempts to make things fun almost certainly backfire, make things less fun. So it's some quality of the people and the belief and the share. Like we all felt like we were sitting on, like riding lightning. Like you knew the thing you were on was rare, was valuable, was exciting. You felt like humbled and honored to be there. Again, you were naive. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been there at all. You'd have thought you weren't possibly good enough to it. It was electric. It was electric.
Yeah, I mean, the word that I often use when people ask me what early Facebook was like, the first word that comes to mind for me is like, it's the most fun I've ever had in my life. Right? Like it was actually just like super fun.
It's the most fun you can have without sleeping.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot of what we try to cover in these talks is a person's kind of like -1 journey, right? And it's often easier when someone hasn't spent 20 plus years at the same company.
Yeah.
But you have reinvented yourself, gosh, like 5-6 times within Facebook. So maybe tell us about a -1 moment where you kind of like, you came in as, the boss who had kind of gone to Harvard, had spent a little bit of time at Microsoft, but in some ways had to kind of go through some period of rediscovery slash almost refocus, find like what is that newsfeed for you in the early days? Like what comes to mind?
Constant. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, so newsfeed. I worked on newsfeed for like the first 18 months I was at the company, but I also did a bunch of other stuff there. I did like early integrity work. I did a bunch of early, like everyone kind of did a lot of jobs. Yeah, that's right. So like, then I literally changed jobs like every 6 months. And I always kind of liken it to, this is a reference that most of you will not get, which is regrettable. Karate Kid. And in Karate Kid, it's a movie that happened a long time ago before you were born. But like he's like painting a fence and then he's like waxing a car and it turns out he's learning karate. That's how I often think about my career. Is like I spent a lot of time painting fences and waxing cars. And then later on I got a job and I was like, oh shit, I know how to do all this stuff. This is cool. Like I've done all these things before. And Newsfeed's a good example. You know, the idea was simple enough. We know the behaviors. Everyone goes to Facebook. There's no feed yet. And they go profile, and they see what's changed. What if we just take all those changes and put them in one place? Simple enough concept. And we wanted to rank like a personal newspaper. Simple enough concept. No one's ever done it before. You can't look, there's no book, there's no website, there's no article, there's nothing. It's just you doing a thing. And so I literally I have this, I don't know if I still have this notebook. I'm like, well, like I would just draw these curves. Like how interesting do I think an event story is? Well, I think an event story is super interesting right before it and right after it, and then not very interesting. So it's like, okay, that's a pretty easy curve. And it's like, what about like a photo album? It's like, yeah, photo albums are only kind of interesting for like maybe the day or two after the thing happens. So I just like started drawing these curves. And so, yeah, like I think for a long time before machine learning finally caught up with us, it was just random arc tangents in the code base of like me being like, what mathematical function matches the curve I just drew in this notebook? So random, so unscientific. And you're just like, and then Mark would like call me and be like, hey, there's too many basketball stories. I'm like, all right, turn basketball down. We're gonna take that parameter, just turn that parameter down. And it was just manual. And it was a tremendous learning opportunity. And again, the naivete that we had, and you're like, oh, one of the greatest sayings of the last 10 years, you can just do things. You can just do things. It turns out you can just do things and it's fine. And so that was like the first one for me was definitely newsfeed. That was crazy. And then once I had newsfeed, yeah, then I was cocky. Then I was like, cool, integrity, people are spamming the site. People are scraping the site. I can do that. And so we started building these tools for anti-spamming, anti-scraping. I used to wake up every 4 hours. Every 4 hours. For 2 years, I did not sleep more than 4 hours at a time. I'd wake up every 4 hours and read an email report that I had this script send to me of what the top activity in the site was across every category. And if I saw a scraper or I saw a spammer, I would get up and I would like go in the database, get rid of all this shit, and kick them off the network. This was wildly unscalable. We didn't have people to do this for me though. And we didn't have the systems and tools to do this automatically with high confidence. So like, I just was like me as a human, like waking up every 4 hours and doing it. So everything was manual. Everything was hard. Everything was like yourself, but it was cool because like you were just like, you were standing alone. Then as the company scaled, I didn't scale with the companies. Like I didn't know how to work with people. I didn't know how to work through a team. I didn't know how to like be like at all polite. So I had a lot of problems. And so like, you're like, oh shoot, okay. So being 0 to 1 on the technology is not enough. You have to be 0 to 1 in a lot of different vectors. Like you have to be able to like take other people with you on this journey. What's that like? And how do you lead through them? So at every different turn, every different job I took, I was just like building another piece of the ability. And now I kind of have a job, which is like professionally -1 to 0 or 0 to 1.
A couple of maybe things to add to the anecdote there. It's interesting. So Boz kind of obviously came up with these hand-tuned weights for our feed kind of like story composition in newsfeed. And then Mark at some point asked me to like, hey, why don't you go build out a machine learning team to go automatically kind of tune this? Like, shouldn't we have some machine learning experts to figure out the coefficients? And I remember like Max Gubin and the whole teams, we spent 18 months on this shit and we couldn't beat the metrics that kind of like had hand-tuned come up. So it's kind of a useful learning lesson for me that humans are actually pretty strong, like, powerful with their intuition. Machine learning isn't going to solve everything. Or maybe it was.
Google search only switched over to fully machine learned like a couple of years ago.
For
a long time, the machine learning would beat the algorithm, and then the hand-tuned team would go in, figure out what the machine learning algorithm had learned, take it back to the hand tune, and they beat it again for another like 6 months. It took we underestimate the degree you can make a lot of progress with like human intuition.
And the second thing is something you said earlier, which I often think about in the context of startups, which is that you cannot tell someone to wake up every 4 hours to check a log that they have emailed themselves, that only comes if somebody actually cares enough, right? Like there's literally no like CEO can tell anybody like, hey, I want you to wake up every 4 hours, like, not get sleep. And so one thing that I often think about that was really special about early Facebook is this culture of total ownership where like nobody had to tell you like to care more. Like every single person was just like, I will make this like, like this will not fail under my watch. This will excel under my watch. And I wish I could say how to recreate that easily. But that I do think is a key defining feature of, I think, the Facebook culture. I haven't been there in a while, but I suspect that is a key part of our DNA from that place.
Yeah, everyone's competitive. Also, things like
It's true.
see, like you want to do it for the team. You also want to do it for yourself. Like the spamming stuff, I felt like I was like personally going to war with these spammers across the country, and I was going to win. God damn it! Like I don't think anyone even, not only did no one tell me to do it, I don't think anyone even knew I was doing it for that time. It wasn't the thing I was doing for like the credit of doing it. I just was like, I get these guys.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do think that I personally subscribe to the philosophy that companies' cultures end up being, at least in some part, a microcosm of the founders' kind of like DNA. And I do think that a bunch of our competitiveness and kind of failure is not an option comes from Mark, right? Like
Yeah.
to this day, like I think it is insane that you ever ask anybody to work harder than you are willing to put in yourself, right? So, and I think that the way that at least at Facebook, it kind of just flew from the top,
Yeah.
right? Like you can never ask anybody to do something that you wouldn't be willing to do yourself. And frankly, like if you look at SPC a little bit, right now, giving Ruchi some credit, when Ruchi comes in here, like the first thing she'll do is to make sure that there's no overflowing trash, because she's like, I don't have a problem taking out the trash. I did that shit for the first 5 years. I'm happy to do it today, right? And the message really here is that there's no job too big or small. Like when you come in, like it's a culture of total ownership.
Yeah, it's a great Reed Reed Hastings used to tell that great story at Netflix where previous job before Netflix, he was like came into work early one day and the CEO was in there like washing mugs, and he's like, oh, it's nice of you to wash these mugs. He goes, yeah, I do it all the time. And he hadn't realized that for the previous like 3 or 4 years he'd been leaving his dirty coffee mug on his desk, and the CEO had been the one washing it and putting it back on his desk clean. He just thought there was like a service to do that. And he's like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. The guy's like, don't be embarrassed. Like, you work hard at the company. Like, the least I can do is like wash your coffee mug. It's not a big deal. And it really, he always talked that story. He's like setting how he wanted to set his tone for his company.
That's awesome. Boz, you touched on this towards the end of your last answer, but I kind of feel in some ways, to your point, being the CTO at a company that is building all these cool new things, everything from obviously kind of like modern AI super intelligence to AR VR glasses to some of the stuff around robotics, like kind of feels like a pretty fun -1 job, so talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'm incredibly fortunate to be in the position I am. I think candidly, I think it's not just me. I think all of us are pretty lucky. Like we have this idea, I think, that human time is relatively like homogenous, and like every year is like roughly the same as any other year. It's just not true. It's just not true. There are periods of time where there are disproportionate amounts of opportunity to have change, to participate in that change, to shape that change than other years. And, I talked to this 2004 group of people that came into the industry. There was relatively few of us at a time when the internet was finally delivering on its true potential. And it was an incredible match. And I was very fortunate to be alive at that time in the space that I was. I think you as a community are in the same kind of place with AI right now. And the rejuvenated energy to think differently about hardware, which didn't exist for good reason for the last 15 years. Like phones were great. And like that was obviously the right hardware platform to focus all the energy on. So it got 100% of the energy. And like phones haven't changed in the last 5 years. And people are starting to feel like, yep, that's not the best place to put the energy. We should put it into different things. So it's a very, very exciting time. And there have been these windows. If you haven't read Dealers of Lightning, Xerox PARC, if you haven't read The Dream Machine, tremendous important history of pre-computing, told through the lens of JCR Licklider, but it's not really about him. It's really the history of pre-computing of our industry. We're at that kind of a time now. And yeah, basically I spent enough time painting fences and maxing cars to be the person who got to kind of be in that job. So my job is it's intense, it's stressful, it's competitive, it's fun as hell.
Something you said is really interesting because, I got to the industry in 2004, which now is a lot closer to the original .com kind of bust, right? But sometimes I wonder if you run the experiment of when I joined in 2001, when everyone was actually just sad, right? And kind of
Yeah.
like, sad. I think you might have taken away pretty different lessons around kind of like, frankly, like some amount of pessimism slash cynicism. Instead, the time that I entered felt like one of kind of like quiet optimism. Like,
Yeah.
we can build a lot of you can build things, right?
Totally.
And I think so. Don't underestimate the time you're in now, even though it feels stressful. There's a lot of shit happening. Like, the model companies will eat your lunch, blah, blah, blah. But it is a unique time right now to actually be optimistic and to build. And it likely, will probably go through some euphoria and then level off for like 5 or 6 years. And that will feel quiet relative to now. So one of the things we talk about at SPC a lot right now is that, my God, if this is a time to work really hard, like you will get compounding returns on the work that you put in right now. And this is why, like, I personally have probably worked harder for the last 2 years than I have in a while, because it just feels like this is a time where it's actually rewarded.
That's 100% right. I wrote this internal memo called Year of Greatness, which leaked, so you can all read it.
We'll talk about some leaks.
Okay. Yeah, there's some leaks out there. But yeah, it's kind of misunderstood in a lot of contexts. But it's like exactly this point. I'm like, hey, every year of your career is not equivalent. This is one of the crazy ones, I guarantee you. Especially for us in wearables, we have the best AI wearable in the market. It's not a question. Everyone's coming for us. Everyone sees it. Google, Apple, pick a favorite, Samsung, all of them. They see it. They want it. They're coming for us. Now we got to double down right now. So this is an unusual time right now.
So the other point that you made was also really interesting, which is that you're right. If you had been into hardware and robotics like 3 years ago, like it's like you wouldn't get into SPC. Like I don't want to talk to people who are building like stupid robots. But now, like actually, the most interesting companies.
Now stupid robots are great.
Now stupid robots are great. So tell us. I mean, you touched a little bit on this when we were talking earlier. But what do you think has changed? Like, what do you think has changed about the robotics landscape that makes today interesting, and kind of your thoughts on the hardware versus the software?
Yeah, robotics. The hardware is not the limiter. So what's attractive about robotics is that the software is the limiter. We know that because even robots from 10 years ago, these like pneumatic or hydraulic robots that had a lot of issues in terms of how to stand up and locomote, and they had a lot of issues in terms of speed of execution, they could still do very complex tasks. They could fold laundry, which is a famously hard challenge for robots. They could do all these hard tasks. They could only do them if they were being teleoperated by somebody. So somebody who put on like a headset and had little grippers could make the robot do complex things, which tells you the hardware isn't the limiter. I'm not saying it's not a limiter over time, but it's not the limiter. Today, even Unitree putting out these incredible so the hardware has caught up further. They're on kind of modern electromechanical actuators. Like it's made a lot of progress, but it doesn't really matter. They still can't do, and locomotion through reinforcement learning has made tremendous progress. You can make anything locomote. You can make a pogo stick locomote. It's not that hard anymore. But you still can't make the robot do anything interesting or useful because it turns out being able to stand upright and locomote is not enough. That's not enough to affect change in the world. It's all up here in the grippers and hands. And that is an area where we just did not have a path through. Conventional roboticists are always building heuristics, just the same way my old newsfeed algorithm worked. And we just couldn't possibly build up sophisticated enough heuristics. Machine learning was the breakthrough, and robotics was late to it. Robotics really only opened their eyes to modern machine learning 2 or 3 years ago. Well, they skipped the entirety of sparse neural network. They didn't do any of it. So they are now speed running, conventional machine learning and trying to get to speed on large language models at a time when world models are becoming popular, becoming possible. We've all seen Genie 3. We've seen what's the direction things are headed. Still a lot of challenges between those things and physics simulations that allow you to do textures and pressures and this kind of stuff and deformation, but still tremendous progress. So I think the major delta between even 2 years ago and today is our belief that the software will arrive. So now you're building out hardware in advance of the software arriving that you think the software will be able to power.
Before we get on to AR glasses, which I want to talk about, I think one of the, you've done many impressive things, obviously, in your time at Facebook, but one of the things that you get deservedly a lot of credit for is actually the transition to mobile and kind of make Facebook make money again. So can you talk to us a little bit about, you're not an ads guy. You were never really an ads guy at Facebook. You mostly spent the money, did not, made the money. So what was that transition like? Why did Mark pick you? Why did you do it?
Yeah, it's probably a lot of lessons here. Layers and layers of lessons. First of all, I wasn't an ads guy. In my head, I was like, no, I'm a product infrastructure guy. That was like my specialty was product and infrastructure. And I had done it with messaging, and I had done it with groups, and I had done it with newsfeed. I'd done that's like this. And I was like, and I was an AI. I could bring AI, that layer, that was the right layer for the AI to live. That was my concept of myself. So when Mark was like, you got to work in the ads thing, I was like, I'm not really an ads guy. Stupid. Who gives a crap how your self-conception of identity is just limiting. So 100%. Get rid of all of that right away. That's the first lesson. Second one is one of Mark's things he loves to do is put the skeptic in charge of the thing. And that was true of me in AR. It's true of me in ads. In part, he liked me because I didn't identify as being a part of it, which meant I was outside the machine. I was not caught up inside the machine. And so then again, God, you can just do things. I went to ads, like, well, I don't know anything about this, so I'm just gonna go talk to people. And as my most popular blog post I ever wrote in my blog is called Cold Start Algorithm. I ran this cold start algorithm. I just talked to people and I would ask them, cool, 20 minutes. And then 5 minutes at the end, who else do I need to talk to? Great. My meetings are always 25 minutes. And so I just followed that, mapped. And so it gave me a couple of things. One, everyone felt great about me because I was in there humble, asking, interested, curious, listening to their point of view. I'm getting a very clear stochastic, what are the top problems? There's just a kind of as you expect, some logarithmic curve where there's like 4 or 5 problems that are really dominating everyone's attention. And I can go work on those things. And I'm also getting a map of like, who do I talk to? Who does everyone point me to? Who does nobody point me to? Also interesting. Like, what's going on there? Are there cliques? Is that person just not in the loop? Are they out? What's going on there? And so knowing nothing was a huge asset to me. Now listen, let's be clear. At this point in time, Facebook made all of its money on the website and none of its money on mobile. But we did have the most popular time spent mobile app in the world. And building an ads business where you already have a ton of humans putting their eyeballs in the thing is not the hardest problem in the world. Like, that can be done. The types of problems it wasn't a technical problem for the most part. It wasn't even an interface problem for the most part. It was a market problem. We had to go get more ads. So I had a list of A through Z of recommendations, a true story, A through Z. And for some reason, there's 2 N's, which I regret, because this document was also leaked at some point. And I'm like, God damn it. I just didn't notice that I'd put 2 N's in there. So it's A plus Z plus 1. I had this whole list of recommendations, and they ranged from the very tactical. The team used a lot of PowerPoint presentations instead of documents, and I thought it was very lossy. So I was like, no more PowerPoints, has to be a doc. Tactical things to very big strategic things. Probably the one big takeaway that was the most important thing was like, I had to really convince Mark on was like, what we need is more ads, not less ads. Because when you have a small number of ads, we're going to show the person the ad that we have for them, even if it sucks. But if I have 10,000 ads to pick from, the chances that one of those is a good fit for me as content is higher. So we just need way, 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 way more ads. We can't, whereas Mark had been kind of throttling it, like very slowly. They just like wanted to just slowly leak ads in. It's like, no, we need so much inventory that's cheap. Advertisers go buy the cheap inventory, then it gets competitive, then it becomes expensive, which is exactly what happened. And so, yeah, it was like, that was another thing for me. I was like, oh, the problems I wasn't even solving technology problems. I was solving strategic problems, business problems. I spent a lot of time with advertisers. I spent a lot of time thinking about what native ads would look like in the platform. They're just important to user experience. It's like it's on meta level. So much of my limits that kept me from doing that previously were self-conceived limits, like self-imposed limits based on my identity. And it ended up being, Mark taking an outsider and putting him in over what I would later learn through legal discovery, these tremendous objections of members of the board and other members of the leadership team, and probably Aditya, don't let him, it's all right. Was the right move. And it wasn't that I was like, oh, Boz is like, he's going to go fix the ads business. It was like, here's just an outside person who I trust to be independent and rigorous in their thinking and like dogged in their pursuit of winning. And that I can deliver on.
Yeah, one anecdote, one tip that, I'll share is that it is generally this is actually somewhat counterintuitive. It is a very good sign for Facebook's business when the price of the ads is falling, because what that really means is that there's more inventory and people are using the product more. And you always want people to spend more time on the site. And then over time, you can figure out ways of matching them with content that is monetizable that they want to click on, right? But it's very counterintuitive because everybody looks at it and they're like, oh, the price of ads is falling. Like, they must have softness. I'm like, no, this is actually the best sign for the business.
Yeah, it's also when we get to win demand from other sources. So exactly. That's when advertisers move budgets. And once they move the budgets, they don't tend to move them back.
Yeah. And I'll spend one more second on this idea of you can just do things. Yeah, it kind of always blows me away when I talk to startups and they kind of like want somebody to go build something. And then they start talking about like, yeah, I'm gonna go find people who have done this shit before. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, why don't you just find somebody who is, they have to meet a baseline level of kind of competence in their field, and then it's just like super hungry and who has that attitude of I can just do things, right? And it always works out better. It's often much easier to hire. And it still continues to surprise me that the general kind of like thought process in like hiring is that go find somebody who knows how to do the thing. And my take is like go find somebody who wants to do the thing and is super hungry to learn. But I think that most engineering is not that complicated if you are willing to kind of like sit down and figure out how the system works. Like any good CS person will be able to figure out how any system works end to end, like pretty reasonably, like quickly. Let's talk about glasses. So were you also? So you already said this. You were also a skeptic in the beginning.
Yeah, when Mark came to me, kind of funny story. I just had my daughter, my second child, and I was on paternity leave. And Mark came to visit, as he did with both my kids. He's a tremendously thoughtful, family-oriented guy. And he came to visit. And he's holding my 1-week-old daughter, Adeline. And he's like, I think you should change jobs and do this AR VR thing. I was like, I think you should get my daughter back. I don't like the leverage you have in this conversation right now. So he gave my daughter back, and then we talked about it. And I said no. And by the way, I said no to the ads job a bunch of times too. And I said no. And he did a great thing, which I thought was clever. He was like, look, Boz, like, I understand you're skeptical. And I went through all the reasons I was skeptical about this future and all the things that would have to happen. He's like, look, do it the other way. He's like, I understand you're saying no. Do it the other way. What would it have to look like for this to be a good idea? Like, what would that look like? God damn, use me against myself. I was just like, so then I write up this like kind of longer document, like what would have to be true for this to be a good idea? And in the process, lay out a roadmap, develop a strategy, and get myself super pumped about that. I was like, oh yeah, we got to do this right now. And so we flipped, and it was tricky at first because you've got a lot of existing people and personnel and their own ideas and what they want to do, and then you have to kind of line those things up. And of course, I didn't know what I didn't know. But yeah, it's quite a clever trick that he pulled. And I say that 10 years later from that conversation, or 8 years later.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good Jedi mind trick. You can also do things to other people.
You can tell them they can do.
You can also do things. But I think, in my opinion, and obviously Facebook had kind of dabbled with building the Facebook phone, right? But Orion / the glasses, that felt different. That was kind of like I'll be honest, from the outside in, as somebody who still obviously cares deeply about Facebook, most of my close friends still kind of, are from that part of my life. That was the first one. I'm like, oh man, this is not something that feels like a Facebook kind of thing to build, right? Like Facebook is good at many things, but building over long-term kind of like build cycles where feedback is a little bit slower, you have to build hardware, you have to work with an extensive partner ecosystem. This is not shit that Facebook knows how to do. I suspect you'll agree with me, at least kind of like from the outside in. So how did you, this actually requires massive organizational and cultural change, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think it's funny, there's two parts to this. The first one is, you have to understand, when you're talking about like Mark's competitive spirit, it's just like anybody having leverage over what he's able to do and like to compete freely is a real issue, right? And so obviously we've all grew up in the last 10 years, the amount of pressure the platforms, these mobile platforms, can put on what you are allowed to do with your customer is pretty intense. We had a very successful games business on the web. We were not allowed to bring it to mobile phones, right? It was $1 billion business on the web back when that meant something. And now it's like you just can't. You're not allowed to do it. So he really felt boxed in. There's a bunch of ideas. We wanted to ship this. We wanted to ship that. We wanted to have that kind of a platform. We wanted to have that kind of a thing, and we just weren't allowed to do those things. It's very frustrating. And so that you can just do things. Mark's like, cool. I will just invent the next hardware platform. Like, how hard can it be? Boss, go invent the next hardware platform. And this is the second part, which I think is meaningful, which is we think of these companies in kind of homogenous terms, but they're really not. And there's always, there's versions of this, sayings like people don't leave a job, they leave their boss. And I think that's true. If you look at me, Chris Cox, and Javi Olivan. So Javi runs, this is COO, Chris Cox is the CPO, he runs Family of Apps, and I run all of the React stuff. Between the three of us, we run the whole company, the whole technical staff. We couldn't be more different, the three of us. We get along immensely well. We're close personal friends, as well as being longtime colleagues, but we run our groups very different. Javier Olivan and Alex Schultz and Naomi Gleit have a regimented system that makes the number go up or down, depending if you're in integrity or ads. Like they have a system of how they get things on time, on delivery. It's operational. It's stuff that just has to work, and we don't want to spend a lot of time on. Family of Apps, Chris Cox, with the top of the S curve here. What's the creative way to explore new territories while also continuing to double down on the core? Very different style, and he's got a tremendous leadership team. Adam Masseri, Will Cathcart, and Chris doesn't manage them very super closely because Mark Zuckerberg manages the whole thing very closely. Mark is deep on all their stuff. He knows all those products inside and out. And he is there all the time. And then my group is like much more independent. We have a lot more space. Mark is super involved with me. He and I set roadmap, we set strategy, we review together. Most of my product reviews that I'm doing with my team, I do with Mark. So Mark is like at my level of review. But most of the feedback he has, he gives to me, and like I have to operationalize it, and there are long cycle times. And so they're just like, we do have the ability to work in these very different cadences inside the structure of the same company very effectively. And we're strength maximizing. We're maximizing the strengths of each individual person and not saying don't be well-rounded. Take your sharp edges and grind them down. But like most of what we've done is taken people's strengths and tripled down, quadrupled down bets on those strengths. And so I like to work much more independently. I can work on very long timelines as long as Mark trusts for this year, like that if he and I are aligned on a goal, if I don't hit that goal, it will not be because we screwed up the execution. It will not be because we didn't understand the assignment. It will be because it was legitimately a failure of market, that nobody wanted the thing, or it physically couldn't be done in some cases. Like that's what it will cause. So there's a lot of trust. That's part of it. A lot of embracing different working styles and different capabilities. Inside my own team, my research group under Michael Abrash runs very differently than my product teams. They have way more leeway to fail, to try different things, to have I don't direct their budgets at a very granular level. I give it to Michael Abrash. He chooses how to allocate it inside that space. That's not how the rest of my teams work. And it's because like it's a different piece. So I do think that's one of the really critical strategies that Mark has been amazing at, is understanding what people's strengths are, absolutely putting them in a position to maximize their strengths, and then allowing people to work in the style they need to work to achieve the results they need to achieve.
Find someone's spike, make it a spear. I'll come back to one thing, boss, that I probably am, not having been at Facebook obviously for the last decade plus. How do you allow for the longer timelines? This is the one that I'm often like, because Facebook is, I think of Facebook as still kind of being one of the preeminent places in the world to build fast, right? Like you want to build a piece of software fast, get it out to 1 billion people. Like Facebook is still probably the best place in the world to do that through kind of, through both process, but also technology and then mindset. But how do you build something for like 10 years and you're still early in its, frankly, adoption cycle?
Yeah, what's crazy is like, we're building just as fast as everyone else, right? Like, so if you imagine like a team that's shipping software on the web every week, like, and then there's a team, one of my teams that has a deliverable that's 5 years away. You're like, how could you possibly be building the same speed? But we are, like, everyone's, like, the engineers are working just as hard. It's just that one of the things doesn't have like an exit criteria that's near term. You do have to get good at assessing things in the middle of a technological cycle. That is like truly a skill that I've had to build up. And it is the beauty of the web was that the market decided. I didn't have to tell you whether your feature was good or not. The market would tell you if your feature was good or not. And that is not a luxury I have, because these are expensive investments. They go a long time. So I have to look at it and proxy the market. I'm the market. If the market does Boz think this is a good idea? That is a dangerous place to be, right? Because then you end up building a product that I like that nobody else likes. We have some mechanisms that we can use to make it not so monolithic. We use user research. So you have an extensive user research team that's bringing it to humans. You're doing a lot more prototyping and mocking. Like, hey, if we were building this thing, if you like, and you spectacular. A good example of this is early on in the AR stuff. What we used to do is we'd get cameras tracking someone's face, and you put them in a mesh room, and you had projectors facing every wall of the mesh, and you would just project a glasses size image wherever they looked inside the room on the mesh to give an example of like, okay, if you had this, would that be interesting or useful? You can prototype, we had somebody prototyping, we have EMG wristbands that we're very excited about. The early prototyping was just somebody watching you do this and then pressing a button on a keyboard, like, they've swiped down, they've swiped up. Like, what if it did that? Like, would that work, So prototyping is hugely important. User research is hugely important. Having a big internal community of people that you trust. Taste does exist. It's a real thing. And I don't know a better way to put that. Taste exists. People who have a history of working on products that have hit mainstream, there's a reason they have that history. It probably means their taste aligns closely to mainstream taste. And so you look for people who have a history of working with new technologies that have had success in market and bringing them in through design, through product management, through engineering leadership. So the only difference, we're not moving any slower than anybody else. We're moving faster. The difference is the evaluation criteria is less objective. It's more subjective. We do our best to make it, rigorous and consistent over time, to give people the satisfaction that, yep, 6 months in, we're on the right path. It's not perfect, but I will say, I actually think the loss rate isn't that different from like the web. Like in the web, we spend a lot of time building products that turns out nobody wanted. We didn't know they didn't want it until we shipped it. We also spend a lot of time building technology that turns out isn't going to work or isn't the thing that people want. But I don't think the loss rate is that different. I do think we got a little lazy as an industry in the web mobile era, where it was just like so easy to not to like turn your brain off and be like, yep, build it, ship it, and see. If you just turn your brain back on, you actually are capable more than you think of assessing like how good is this going to be. And so we've had to kind of activate that ability, but I actually have not found it as hard as I expected when I started this job.
It's a great answer. I mean, I think that two things that I think are pretty probably like applicable to the early stage folks here, right? So the first one is, as a startup, you often have to kind of essentially like play this like stacking game, which is that like, if I do this thing well, if I make this assumption, then like all of these other things can play out if I can solve this core problem. And I think your methodology there of like, if you can assume that you can build X and Y, call it in a reasonable time frame, then what else is possible? I think most people are actually somewhat, they don't do a good enough job of painting the future where the underlying core kind of bets to pay off, right? Which is that if you believe X and Y to happen, but I think that startup founders like, at SPC could do a better job of that. And the second one is worth kind of highlighting, which is that I think for a long time, it was just kind of bad to talk about the fact that some people had better subjective taste in things than others. And I think as a startup founder, if I were interviewing someone, I'd be like, I actually want to know, does this person have good subjective taste in their designs, in their marketing, in their storytelling, in the quality of their code, right? Like there's an essence to the thing and you should just call it out. There's nothing bad about it. Like this is why like it's not just about how you do in the interviews that you write, kind of the code that you write on the board. This is why I like go into someone's 15-year history or 10-year history and like, what have you done? Like you cannot escape your body of work, Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, I agree. Also, one last thing I'll say, I think the interesting construct for me, I really thought hardware was going to be the big blocker for me. I thought, okay, here is software guy taking over a hardware division, classic, anti-patterning technology. Hardware actually hasn't been the harder part. And some of that is because actually the hardware industry never got into those shortcuts. And so the hardware industry already had great systems for validating the industrial design and comfort. Like those existed. The software side has been much harder. The software side, getting the software people to think outside of the mobile phone frame and getting a web frame and like feeling confident in building a design on a 5-year plan without being able to like just like have it all working day one has been much harder than getting the hardware right.
Wow. That's fascinating. I would not have guessed that. Yeah. Especially given that software people are used to shipping faster,
Yeah, it's because they can't have that immediate response. There's like a real reluctance to embrace new paradigms.
I mean, you could also, maybe I'm talking the book here, but like the reality is that I think that the mobile platforms have not actually allowed any true kind of innovation outside of literally their box that they give you,
Literally, yeah.
Which I think has kind of in some ways dulled the creativity of everyone building for those platforms, because you're not able to think of what the future could look like beyond literally like the
100%.
like whatever the 6 inches by 3 or whatever.
100%.
Okay, we have 8 more minutes here, so let's see. I do want to talk about your work in the Army Reserve. That's something that I personally found deeply inspiring. I think everybody should be asked to kind of like, in my opinion, do something of service for their country. I think that's a really good thing. So here's my question: what have you learned already from kind of the time that you have spent with our military that you think Silicon Valley should kind of like embrace more or learn more of?
Yeah, I love that. There's 3 different things I've learned. I've only been in the Army for 6 months, and so like it's not over-indexed on it. The first one is actually first of all, there's a truly wonderful universality to some of the key, like the Army schools on leadership, for example. Obviously, the Army talks a lot about leadership, especially for officers. I'm a field grade officer, which is quite senior in the Army. And if you read the documents that they've produced, they read like every great leadership training that I've ever gotten or that I've given for people in our industry. So there's a lot of commonality. It turns out the Army is managing people. The Army is full of people. The Army is just people. Your company is just people. And a lot of the jobs that we have are people. It's just, are you helping people? Are you navigating people? Are they have a positive mindset? Can you help them cultivate a positive? Are they have a growth mindset? Can you help them cultivate a growth mindset? Like, do they understand the mission? Can you help them understand the mission? Like, it's incredible how much overlap there has been for me at first blush. Then you think about it, you're like, of course, it's all just people. And it turns out those skills are universally applicable. The second one is the Army exists inside of a system. The Army exists inside of a Department of Defense system, inside of a historical system of how they conceive themselves, of how other people conceive them. And just like I said earlier about my own journey, it's a trap. Like it's a tremendous trap. If you think of yourself as being inside the system, you like never break the system, even if the system is the major constraint that you're facing. That is a thing where I think, one of the reasons they brought me in, along with some tremendously talented people in our industry, Bob McGrew, Shyam Shankar, and Kevin Wheel, is an awareness at the highest levels that is true, and they need people to join who like are primarily connected outside the system to like provide that perspective to try to give it the nudge that it needs to break out of these like systems of habits and behavior. The third piece is I've actually been super impressed with the personnel. It's incredible. Like, these are obviously, you expect people in the Army to be loyal and dedicated and patriotic. They're brilliant. They're highly capable. They're extremely fluent in like they're not Luddites. Extremely fluent in what modern technology is. They don't have all the tools. They don't have all the tools that they need. Right now, and talk to some people in the room doing private AI kind of stuff. They have a tremendous database of information, as you can imagine, that they are never going to put in any model unless there's a lot of controls around how that. And we would benefit a lot as a society if those models had access to that kind of information. And so I think if you read again these histories I was talking about, actually, if you don't want to read one of those histories, you are a podcast person, do the Lockheed Martin podcast on Acquired. We have lost track of what was the birthright of this nation in technology by not having our technology sector and our national defense sector connected very well. Palantir and Anduril are doing incredible work. They're just the beginning. I think there's a lot more opportunity there. Every single company used to be a company that did products for consumers and also did what they could to contribute to the national defense. And by the way, made good money doing it. It was good business. A lot of reasons that fell apart. But the enmity that was felt in Silicon Valley 10 years ago towards the military complex, I think was really misplaced and really harmful to the long-term health of our ability to remain the most competitive place to build software, to make sure that an American point of view in particular triumphs on a global stage in the way that it did with the internet and mobile phones. I think we underestimate tremendous global economic and social benefits of that. And so I do hope people, just in the back of their minds, plant a little seed like, hey, if there's a way this could help the US government, we should be open to pursuing those contracts because there's money there and there's a lot of good that can be done there.
I think it's awesome, the work you're doing there. And thank you for that. Boz, who is one person that you think more people should read or listen to?
read Insanely Great by Stephen Levy. Read stuff from the 1960s. Read stuff about the computing revolution of the 1960s and 70s. That is the closest analog you're going to find to the moment we're in now with AI, robotics, and wearables.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you're doing the job that we all do, then like Solo of a New Machine by Physiker, like kind of like the Dream Machine, Dealers of Lightning. Like this is just inspiring. Like this is like people kind of building the future as they imagined it like 30, 40, 50 years ago.
There are people just doing things, and you will see how the fingerprints of their choices affect you today. And that's you for the people coming 60 years from now. And that 100%. Wasn't true 10 years ago, and it won't be true 10 years from now. It's right now. Now is the window to put your fingerprint on the next 60 years of computing.
Yeah. These are people just doing things and just kind of like building things. Okay, that's a good answer. That's a great answer, actually. Have you done any hacking yourself recently? Have you been vibe coding?
Yeah, it's such a cliche, but I have a house, and the house has like solar panels and has like a irrigation stuff. And I'm just like, every IoT thing has like some insane, often unpublished API that I need, like definitely need LLM's help. To, like, but I'm like trying to get it all into a front end. It's like, this is the most cliche thing. We should joke when people left Facebook, like, oh, they left Facebook. What are they doing? Obviously, home automation. This is not a commercial thing. This is just for fun. Like how many, like 10 of them. Like, so it's not for fun. It's a thing that, but it is a great use of LLMs because these things that have just awful or no documentation for unpublished APIs that are inscrutable without that kind of help.
I think, Boz, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I think, thank you for everything that I think you've done, obviously, for Facebook, but also, I think, for our industry. Thank you, man.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah. That was another episode of -1 from the team at South Park Commons. Make sure to subscribe to our show wherever you listen to podcasts and find us on social at South Park Commons. And thanks to our friends at Atomic Growth for their support in bringing this episode to life.